Okay, I am standing here on the Mummersburg Road, and we're looking at the David Shriver farm, which was a Confederate field hospital for O'Neill's brigade in July of 1863, just following the battle. Now, a little bit about the house. The right side, or the left side of the house that we're looking at here, that's the fieldstone, was built in 1824. That was the extension. The original side, which is the right side of the house, which today is boards. That underneath of those boards rather, is 15-inch thick logs, and that was from 1784. That side of the house was built in 1784. Again, one of the older homes here in Gettysburg. But the entire house itself is a Civil War structure because it was completed by 1824. And then later, a smokehouse, which sits to the right of the house, was built in 1831. And we're going to take a quick walk over here, and you'll see the smokehouse right there in front of us. So this entire structure is a Civil War building. It sits here at 1361 Mummersburg Road. It is privately owned, and I just talked to the owner a minute ago. He gave me permission to take some pictures, shoot my video. I do want to mention that at the time of the Civil War, David Shriver was the owner of the home, thus the name David Shriver Farm. And the property actually was 500 acres. It extended about 100 yards and behind the house into the wood line, but it also extended across the road to today what is these houses over here. And just over here is where the original barn, the Civil War barn, which is no longer here, sat. So this entire area here, in this 360-degree view, was the David Shriver Farm. Now, during the Battle of Gettysburg, just as the Confederate troops passed by here into the town, this quickly, after casualties started mounting, became a Confederate field hospital for O'Neill's brigade. And it mainly was comprised of men from North Carolina. Now, at one time, there were over 760 wounded men on this property. However, there were only 3 surgeons to take care of them. Behind the house was grave sites for at least 23, maybe more men. And the hospital was General Ramsey, General Doles, and Colonel O'Neill. A couple of the men that were here was Colonel Francis Marion Parker from the 13th North Carolina. He was wounded in the face below the eye, and then the ball excited out the back of his head. There was also a Captain Charles Allen, who had his arm amputated in the barn that sat across the street. Both of these men were from the 13th North Carolina. It was said that General Rhodes, whose troops passed by down this road towards Gettysburg, left over half of his division here. 760 men he left here when they fled Gettysburg. Now, one of the more interesting stories of a soldier that was here was a man from the Louisiana Tigers, and his name was J.W. Shackelford. And J.W. Shackelford, on the way to Gettysburg, could not make the march. Today we would call it probably appendicitis is what he suffered from, maybe where his appendix exploded, but he could not make the march to Gettysburg, and he dropped on the side of the road. He was taken to this house, and later that evening on June the 30th, 1863, he died here, and apparently he died in the home, making him most likely the first official Confederate casualty of the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, Shackelford was brought out of the house, and he was buried somewhere here by the side of the road. Now, as far as the other graves that were here, the 23 or more plus graves, a lot of those were removed in the early 1870s. However, it has been said that the Private Shackelford's grave was never located. Therefore, he was never removed, and his remains probably lay here somewhere in the front yard of this house, or maybe even under the current roadbed, since the road was much narrower back during the Civil War. The smokehouse was also used during the time of the field hospital. The smokehouse was being used to keep medical items cool. Because it was a smokehouse where they would smoke the meats and cook, but it was also a blockhouse that could be used to keep things cold as well. This has been the David Shriver Farm Confederate Field Hospital for Colonel O'Neill's brigade in July of 1863 on Gettysburg Battlefield, Facebook. Okay, this is going to be part 2 of the David Shriver Farm here on Mummersburg Road, 1361 Mummersburg Road. And this is going to be a supplement to a video I did on the David Shriver Farm. I did not mention that video. I also wanted to mention that Confederate troops from Rhodes Division who came from the northwest up this road where the camera we're facing now had actually scouted Gettysburg just in the previous days, where they had sent scouts up the road toward the town of Gettysburg, and they passed by the house, and there was actually a young black woman who they were trying to gather information from. However, she did mislead the Confederate soldiers and give them wrong information so that they did not know the strength of the enemy. It was here on the night of June 30th, just to the right side of the house here, beyond this fence, where this wood line is today, that Confederate soldiers, North Carolinians and Louisianans, bivouacked before pulling out their camp and heading back to the west on the Mummersburg Road to meet the rest of that division. And of course that division under General Rhodes will come up this morning early on July 1st, 1863. Many of the men that would be in the epic struggles over on Oak Ridge, such as Iverson's brigade, who would be decimated there in Oak Ridge on a volley that was fired by the 88th and 90th Pennsylvania. Many of those troops passed by this road, and you want to go back and watch some of my videos like Iverson's Pits and some of the battles I've done, some of the videos rather I've done on Oak Ridge, because many of those troops that marched up this very road in front of the David Shriver Farm, that battle would ensue on July 1st, 1863. This has been the David Shriver Farm Part 2 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook.